You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin here, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. It's scouting the opponent, of course, and every week we give you an idea of the Miami Hurricanes football team's opponent for the week. And it's the regular season finale with everything on the line for the Hurricanes this week, playing the Syracuse Orange. And today I've got Jim Stechschulte from the Juice Online to provide me some insight on the Orange. Thanks for joining me today, Jim.
Marcus, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a short week. I guess you could say as far as preparation for us and for everybody, I guess, involved here. So definitely wanted to get you on to get your opinion on the Orange, who are 8-3. Really impressive season from first-year coach Brown here. So just kind of wanted to get your insight on the buzz around Syracuse right now. Even though they don't really have a ton to play for here, they're already obviously bowl eligible, not in mention for ACC championship game, but everybody wants to beat Miami, right? So especially when they're ranked in the top 10. So what's the buzz around Syracuse going into this game?
Well, I feel that just the fan base in general, obviously winning would be great. I mean, we are well versed in how the program has struggled more often than not over the last 20, 25, maybe even, better part of the last 3 decades. And so 8-3 is heights that we've only seen, I think, 3 times in that span at any point in the season. Only a couple 10-win seasons in that last 25 years. So 8-3 is nothing for them to sneeze at, and the fact that it's coming in Fran Brown's first season is a real positive, and kind of it's a little unusual to see that the program has kind of such a sharp upward trajectory, especially so quickly after the coaching transition. Sure. I do think one of the things that's kind of come along with that's a little bit of a unique for the program is the last couple of weeks after games, Coach Brown has been trying to actually grab more attention to the program. 2 weeks ago, after they wanted to move to 7-3 in the post-game press conference, he was kind of angling for Syracuse to get votes and actually get ranked in the top 25 polls. And then this past week, after they beat UConn for that 8th win, he was even in the post-game soliciting, trying to get ESPN Game Day to come to Syracuse. The Orange are one of the few power conference programs that have never hosted game day ever since they started taking the show on the road. Wow. So it's with especially some of the more devoted fans, that's one of the things that kind of sticks in their craw a little bit is how game day has never been here. And so it's just kind of an easy way to kind of try to grab attention from the national media. At the same time, the buzz around the team is hampered a little bit because the student body is on break all of this week for the holiday. So that depressed the crowd size for the last Saturday's game against Connecticut, and we'll also probably do the same for this Saturday's game against the Canes on Monday in his in his game week press conference. Coach Brown even was trying to solicit the students to return back to campus, trying to pitch Saturday's game as a little bit of a party so they could go home, spend some time with the family, and come back to campus and have a good time. Not sure how well that's going to help out, but at the same time, it kind of fits with the profile of kind of trying to grab some attention and get people to take notice of what's going on up in Syracuse.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to get kids to come back to upstate New York, in November if they're not from the area, of course. Tough sell for Fran Brown, but he's been doing great in recruiting. So apparently he's a good salesman from that perspective. So interesting to see what that crowd will look like, because that has been kind of a topic of conversation here down in Miami, just because, it's not called the Carrier Dome anymore, but it's still the Dome up there in Cuse. So it's definitely something that the Hurricanes are preparing for.
Yeah.
Syracuse has played in a ton of close games this season. I would say most of the games have been one-score games. So when you look at the games this season, Jim, what has kind of, I guess, caused them to be in these close games? How come they can't pull away, or how come they are, making these games close?
Well, the offense has been pretty good, but not great. And the defense is not as good. And they lack big play capability on defense. So they don't really have the ability to kind of shut the door on opponents when you go up 2 scores. Then, they don't really have that ability to end the game or really press things and take it to that next gear and, push it up to, a 3rd score. The offense is reliant on stringing together long drives. There's not a whole lot of big play threat. They will occasionally break one, usually a deep ball or a running play that breaks contain, but it's not something that's like a backbone of the team. A lot of their scoring drives will be 8, 9, 11, sometimes 14 plays to go the length of the field. And so they do eat up time, which takes opportunities away from the opponent, but opportunities away from themselves to score again. Again, getting back to the defense and how it's not a big play team. They average just over 1 turnover and just over 2 sacks a game. There's not a whole lot of guys on that scouting report where you say, this is a guy we absolutely have to keep in check. This guy's a game wrecker. We can't let him take over the game. And so they just don't have the ability just to kind of stop opponents at will. And even special teams has kind of hindered their efforts sometimes. There have been 3 different kickers that the Orange have used this year, and they're a cumulative 12 of 20 on field goals with a long of 44. So Jackson Kennedy is their guy now, and he had a good start, but then still missed 2 field goals last week against Connecticut, which helped keep that game closer and ended up making that score. The scoreboard was a lot closer than what the stat sheet suggested it should have been. And that's part of it. And that's part of it. It even goes down to the blocking schemes on special teams. They've had multiple kicks blocked, both in place kicking and punting. So it's a little bit of self-destructive behavior, let's call it, that's kind of helping keep games close over the course of the year.
Yeah, it seems like it's a variety of things. But, it seems like teams kind of find a way to put it all together against Miami for some reason. And I got a feeling that Syracuse will on Saturday and make this game very competitive. Give us an idea of basically kind of what schemes Syracuse runs on offense and defense for the audience.
Sure. On offense, like I said, they're not a big play offense. They use long drives, but it's built around their pass attack and Kyle McCord. They're very pass heavy. They're at they run the 63 over 63% of the play calls are pass plays, and they lead Division I's as a team in both pass attempts and completions, and are second in passing yards. But a lot of where they operate is the short to intermediate range. And not just like wide receiver screens, but a lot of like shallow crossers and slants that are in that like 5 to 7 yard range, where I don't think the talent, it's not a situation where the talent dictates if we just get the ball into a playmaker's hands on this, shallow crossing route, they can turn upfield and turn a 5-yard pass into a 25-yard gain. There's not a lot of big home run speed. So it's more designed to keep the offense moving and keeping them ahead of the sticks, getting them to like 2nd and 4 or, a 3rd and 2. And then it keeps the whole playbook open, because then they tend to use a little more run as a complement to the pass than the other way around. While they also dominate the ball, and that the number of plays they run, they're second in the country in play on offensive players run and 14th in yards per game. But that short passing game sticks out in the fact that they're 70th in yards per play. So there's not a whole lot of even like 12, 15, 18-yard routes in that mid to long range that they look at. They do add some to kind of mix it up, and they do send guys deep to kind of take the top off things in open space. But they're really reliant on keeping themselves in positive down and distance. They're 12th nationally in third down percent conversions, and they're 18th in fourth down conversions, while being tied for 10th in the number of attempts on fourth down. So that reflects how it all builds into that favorable down and distance. And it's an extremely boring thing for me to keep repeating. But that's the big part of it, is that they just kind of, it's much more a workman-like machine kind of offense, as opposed to run on first and try to work downfield with big shots and, try and go for the big play. And it's the easiest way for team. One way they've struggled with it is the timing can very easily get thrown off if you have corners who play physically, who jam at the release point and kind of slow down the releases to allow pressure to be generated on McCord, or if you can just get pressure just with your four, especially, and kind of clog things up in a zone defense behind it. McCord can get thrown off and is susceptible to pressure. He's an okay athlete, but not a massive running threat. And then, like I mentioned, the running game is complementary. LeQuint Allen, who's their running back, is
sure.
He's not putting up dynamic numbers, but in my opinion, he's the best player on the team. He's a true 3-down back. He handles most of the work, but he's not a home run guy, not a big bull, but he's kind of just like the best of both, where he's got power and some speed, but he's also very effective in the pass game, both as a receiver and as a blocker and blitz pickup. He's really a really great complementary player as part of that offense.
Very nice. Now, defensively, kind of what should Miami, Cam Ward, Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, what do you think they are kind of scheming around right now in preparation to play Syracuse?
Well, when you think about Cam Ward and his abilities as a quarterback, Miami looks like a big threat in the pass game. I mean, when I was checking all those Syracuse offensive stats, it was hard to miss that Miami was so close to them in pass game stats. But I think that Miami is a much greater big play threat than the Syracuse skill position players are. So I think they should be able to operate pretty freely in the pass game. Syracuse does not have a very frightening pass rush. They have two players who have over 3 sacks. And so there's not a whole lot. It's not a great team that generates pressure. So Ward should be comfortable in the pocket most of the day and be able to have time for even longer downfield routes to develop and find holes in the defense, that sort of thing. The upside is also if Ward is having an off day, the Syracuse run defense is not particularly stout. They get gashed pretty regularly. They do, the one thing that's they kind of almost play a complementary style to the offense in the same way that they want to stay in good down and distance, because they're not a particularly great defense. They're kind of small and mostly small and inexperienced in the defensive line. When they got absolutely pasted by Boston College's ground game a few weeks ago, there was only one player on the depth chart on the defensive line who weighed more than any of the 5 starting Boston College linemen, and a different one was the only one who was taller, or as tall as one of the starting BC offensive linemen. So they're very susceptible to a power run game as well, and that can just set up, play action opportunities as well. And, they're kind of a bend but not break defense, which they are reliant on negative plays by the opponent. Unfortunately, they don't generate an excessive number of tackles for loss. Like I said, they're about 2 sacks a game, and there's about around 5 to 5.5 tackles for loss per game. And then, but if they can get a play that goes for a loss or a penalty by the opponent, a holding, a false start, something, they do a lot better. The one thing they are good at is getting off the field on third down. They allow opponents to convert just under 35% of third downs. That usually comes from a function of getting the opponent behind the sticks, whether it's the rare tackle for loss or a mistake that actually hurts them as far as the yards to go to first down.
Nice. Jim Stechschulte once again joining me from the Juice Online, providing us with some great insight on the Syracuse Orange. You talked a little bit about Kyle McCord, and when you look at his stats game to game, it's like sometimes he's got these monster games, like stat games. Like last week against UConn. I mean, I think he threw over 50 passes and threw over 400 yards, multiple touchdowns. And then you've got games like against Pitt where he throws like multiple interceptions for touchdowns.
You can say it. He threw 5. 3 of them got returned for touchdowns. You can say
it was wild. That was just a wild game. I think one of the more interesting games of the entire college football season was that one. So he's obviously a talented guy, so kind of give us an idea of like what his strengths, what his weaknesses are, and just why he can be so dangerous against, Miami.
McCord, just off the top, he's been exactly what this team and frankly this program needed this year. Their starting quarterback finished his eligibility last year, so they definitely need a replacement. And Fran Brown was able to use his previous relationship, knowing McCord from when he was a kid, actually, to get him to commit to Syracuse through the portal. He's an experienced quarterback and a team leader, so that's the stuff that's just off the top. And for the most part, he's been very accurate this season, and without having elite arm strength, which is a very good combination. Because he has stretches where that lasts, a drive or 2 drives or even a quarter and a half, where just every ball is right on the money. And when he is throwing the ball like that, his confidence grows as well, and he's willing to try even greater feats of of accuracy without that arm strength. Because he'll put the ball into extremely tight windows, and some of those passes you just kind of go, how? Like, did he throw it through the DB's hand, kind of thing? And so it plays in that conference. He believes that his guys are going to make plays for him if he just puts it on him, and so he does. But he'll also have stretches. We'll have a drive or maybe 2 drives where just slips a gear or something, and it just kind of the accuracy just kind of misses for a couple drives, but then he gets it back later in the game. The confidence thing with his ability to be that accurate without that great arm talent is that double-edged sword, because it sometimes gets into problems, not just in the Pitt game that you referenced with the 5 interceptions, but he's got 12 on the season. I mean, as you mentioned, he does throw the ball a lot, so his interception percentage is not egregious, but it is a risk but he is trying to make plays happen. Some of his not as great looking interceptions have come on some of the deep shots downfield, a couple of times where he's just overthrown or otherwise just missed the receiver. But again, it all comes back to his accuracy, because he's willing to take whatever receiver is open on a play and trust that guy, and he'll put it on the receiver's hands, and it usually pays off. That actually also plays into that offensive scheme about short to intermediate passes, closer targets, where it's easier for him to find his targets downfield and put the ball on the money. But he's been great. Some of the clips you've been running during my monologue here are showing where he's literally putting it on the hands of his receiver where only his receiver can get it. So he's also, I think, also getting back to his leadership part is having come from a program like Ohio State where he was very successful and played on a team that played big games and won a lot of them. I think he provided this team with a degree of accountability from a player that hadn't been around before, because he's a guy who's done things, been in big games and beaten good teams and that kind of thing. So I think it just kind of all has worked out, kind of being that perfect addition to the program for this season.
Yeah, you mentioned the highlight that I'm playing here, Kyle McCord. You see the accuracy, in the clips here, and he likes Rondé Gadsden, and we are very familiar with Rondé Gadsden down here in South Florida. He starred for one of the best programs down here in American Heritage Plantation, and of course his dad played for the Miami Dolphins for many years, under, of course, the same name, and. I would expect that Miami is going to try to make sure that they game plan around Rondé Gadsden and Kyle McCord, that combination. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about him and just kind of what he's kind of meant to this offense, Gadsden, and any other playmakers that Miami should be kind of aware of going into Saturday.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Gadsden is one of the top receiving threats in this team. Coming into the season, I think he was the top of the line for the opponent. Scouting plan. Just because he's a tight end, he's not a big bulky tight end. I think of him more as an oversized wide receiver who happens to play tight end. Under Dino Babers a couple years ago, they moved him inside from wide receiver to play as a tight end. He's not like an inline blocking tight end. He was usually offset from the formation because he's more of a pass threat. He was injured last year, was able to put on some weight, so he's more like he has closer to traditional tight end size as opposed to just being kind of a jumbo-sized wide receiver now. But he got All-American honors a couple of years ago as a tight end. He kind of works in that short to intermediate range. A lot of it is in the middle of the field. But as the highlight showed, they will send him down the line if they can get him into like a man situation. One of the things they like to do is because he's 6'5" and 230 is if they can get him in a man situation against a defensive back, he's too big to handle. And then when they'll line him inside, sometimes they'll get him on a linebacker who's usually a little bit too slow to handle him. So they kind of try to use him as a bit of a mismatch in their offense. But he's not the only pass receiver who's been extremely productive for the Orange this year. They have two wide receivers who are competing with him on the stat sheet every week. And it's one of the things that, tying back to what I was talking about with McCord about how he'll take the open guy. The two leading wide receivers of the team are Trevor Pena and Jackson Meeks. Between Gadsden, Pena, and Meeks, all three of them have at least 65 receptions for at least 743 receiving yards and at least 5 receiving touchdowns on the season. So McCord is more than happy to spread it around to whoever's open, whoever's available, whatever the play or the coverage dictates. Like I said, Gadsden is the big size guy that they use for either middle of the field or sometimes deep shots down the sideline. Pena is a smaller player, more quick than fast. He's also doubles as the punt returner for the Orange. So he tends to operate close to the line of scrimmage, or even like last week against UConn, they ran like a simple out route for him for a 3-yard touchdown pass. And just like he got a quick enough break off the line that the DB just didn't have a chance. Meeks is just more kind of just an overall good football player. He's not a giant. He's not a speed burner kind of guy. He's just a very good football player who transferred to the Orange from Georgia. Fran Brown bring him over from his previous stop as the coach. And so all three provide very diverse threats through the pass game for the Orange. That looks like Trevor Pena right there, getting that quick release to the outside. McCord puts the ball on his hands, and he's able to beat the defender to the pylon. And I mentioned LaQuint Allen earlier as a 3-down back. He has 55 receptions on the season to add a 4th real, threat out in the pass game. He also has 819 rushing yards, and he's totaled 15 touchdowns this season, 12 of them running the ball. He's generally the primary running back for the Orange. He plays all 3 downs, all situations. But he's, so the skill position level is actually pretty high for the Orange on offense.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I am very familiar with the playmakers that Syracuse has that Miami should try to shut down. If there's a weakness on this football team overall, it is definitely the defensive backfield. They've just been banged up for the most part this season. After the first game, they lost potential starter in Damari Brown, and in recent weeks, they've lost Jadias Richard from the defensive backfield as well. So I think, that is a concern. I think this could be a very high-scoring game based on what you've shared with me, Jim, just because, these are two very pass-happy teams at times that can also run, but, that both teams can definitely, play in a shootout, which we might see in the Dome on Saturday.
Yeah, I think this may matchup appeals to more casual fans because there's a very high chance of an indoor fireworks show.
For sure. So now we kind of get to the part of the program where we share our predictions for the game here. And I usually kind of base my prediction based on the guest that I bring on and the information that the guest shares. And from based on what you shared, man, I'm thinking maybe the over is the play here, because I just because it just seems like Syracuse is going to move the ball against Miami, and I don't see Miami not moving the ball themselves. And the total is actually pretty high here. It's 67.5. So I guess Vegas is thinking what we're thinking, Jim. Yeah. And then the actual spread of this game was 10. It's now gone up to 11. Mm-hmm. So money seems to be going on Miami to win this by double digits. But for me, not to say that I'm a betting man at all, but home dogs are usually a good play, especially in college football. So not sure if Syracuse will do enough to win this game, but I feel like they'll keep this one certainly closer than 11 points, just because there's going to be a lot of pressure on Miami. Miami's always has preached this 1-0 mentality week to week, and that they're focusing on, the team and that they're going to play and the task at hand. But I think it's hard not to feel the pressure of the game if you're Miami. Syracuse has nothing to lose here. True. And they really don't have a lot to gain either. So they're going to be playing extremely loose. So I think the pressure is all on Miami here. I think Miami squeaks this one out. And I just don't think I don't think they cover those 11 points. So I'm going to say Miami wins. Yeah, a shootout. I would say, this is going to be like a 45-40 game. That's what I'm going with here for right now. I mean, that could change, once I put an my official prediction story out. But right now, I'm feeling like it's like going to be a 45, maybe 38 type of game. So that's what I'm going with. What say you, Jim?
I agree with you completely that it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Miami's high-powered offense is going to translate very well to the Dome. With the students being off campus, we joked about it a little before. I don't see a massive return to campus in time to make kickoff at 3:30 on Saturday. So I don't think there's going to be a significant home field advantage for the Orange. Yes, they are going to be playing in front of their home fans in the familiar confines, and the people who are there will be loud, and the fact that it is in a dome will magnify that some. But I just don't think it's going to be enough to really shift the game in Syracuse's favor. I think Miami has much higher level of big play capability than Syracuse does. I also am very concerned about Syracuse on their defense and they have some tackling issues that rise from time to time, and I suspect that's going to look a lot worse against a team with skill position players and a very pass-happy attack like Miami does. I actually think it's going to kind of easily coast by the over. I'm not a gambler either, but I did note the over in the line when I was getting ready for this and saw that over, and I'm just like, well, I'm going to make sure my prediction actually goes over the over because I think it's going to be a high scoring game. While I'm also, like I said, I'm not a gambler, but I also double digit home dogs are a very popular bet. So I understand if you want to do that, especially because with Syracuse's familiarity and ability in the pass game, it seems like a backdoor cover is quite likely, especially because the line has jumped up to 11. It gets past 10. You could have Syracuse backdoor touchdown to get to 45-35 or something like that.
Exactly.
And squeak in for the cover. I don't think they're actually going to cover, because I think Miami's their offensive abilities combined with some of the shortcomings on Syracuse defense, I just think are not a good match. I don't think Syracuse is going to be able to harass Cam Ward in the pass game much, and I think they're going to be able to make plays downfield, and I would not be surprised in least for Miami to have 2, if not or more, big play touchdowns, particularly in the pass game, covering 30 yards or more. My pick would be Miami 44, Syracuse 31. I just think that Syracuse isn't going to be able to stay with them on offense. I just think that's going to be the difference. I understand that you make an absolutely valid point about how the pressure's on Miami because they're playing for a spot in the conference championship game and the playoff spot, and possibly even a bye in the playoff if things work out. If things out of their control work out certain ways. So I understand completely about the pressure being on Miami. I just think that they're the better team, and the setup, even though it's in Syracuse, doesn't really make it so that the JMA Dome is that scary of a place to play. So I think the Canes will take this, and I think they'll squeak by. They'll actually cover, like I said, 44-31 would be my pick.
Excellent. I do feel like maybe it could be that score as well. I mean, that's just one touchdown off of of my score there, and the fact that the crowd is probably not going to be a factor is good insight, because I think I didn't really kind of factor in, okay, it's the holiday season, so a lot of the kids will not be in town, and just families overall will probably leave upstate New York to go elsewhere. But great stuff from you, Jim. Lastly, Thanksgiving is coming up, so what's your favorite Thanksgiving? What's your go-to Thanksgiving food here, man?
My go-to, it's changed recently. It's my wife makes a stuffing that she got in some old recipe, but it's kind of a cheat because it actually has almost more meat in it than anything else. So it's got like sausage and bacon in it. So it actually lapped everything else. I never used to really be a big stuffing guy, but then she made this and I converted. So that's one for me.
Very nice. For me, it's like dressing. I'm from the South, obviously, so we do dressing and not stuffing. But my mom actually does a really good stuffing as well with meat in it too. But she does ground beef. She does ground beef in the stuffing. But for me, it's like the yams is like kind of one of my prized possessions to kind of go to. I get really excited for those. And then mac and cheese, can't go wrong with that either.
You cannot go wrong with that.
Right. That is going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast, scouting the opponent, Syracuse. Should be a fun one in upstate New York, Jim. We'll see who comes out on top. Great insight from you. Thanks for joining me today again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Marcus. Really appreciate the invite.
No problem. Make sure you subscribe to CanesCounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Make sure you also subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Until the next episode.